what's the use of two strong legs if you only run away? And what use is the finest voice when you have nothing good to say? What good is strength and muscle if you only push and shove? And what's the use of two good ears when you can't hear those you love? It's not just what you're born with, it's what you choose to bear. And it's not how big your share is, but how much you can share. And it's not the fights you dreamed of, but those you really fought. It's not what you've been given, it's what you do with what you've got. Yeah, it's not just what you're born with, it's what you choose to bear. And it's not how big your share is, but how much you can share. And it's not the fights you dreamed of, but those you really fought. It's not what you've been given, it's what you do with what you've got.
Greeting, friends. Welcome back to Seeds of Revolution. Today we have a returning friend speaking to us on our podcast, Clifton Ariwakehte Nicholas. He is a Mohawk community member, an activist starting with the Oka crisis, and a cannabis activist as well in recent years. Clifton was on with us a couple of weeks ago to talk with us with filmmaker Frank Lopez about their film Red Road to the West Bank. And I asked Clifton to come back to talk about his other work and his other activism. So Clifton, thanks so much for returning to Seeds of Revolution. I really appreciate it.
Thanks for having me and appreciate the invite.
Anytime. It's always a pleasure to talk to you and Frank. So let's just dive right in. I think your activism world and life got started with the Oka crisis, which is a seminal incident in contemporary Canadian politics. I'm still thinking with my American brain. If you could just give our listeners a little brief recap for those of them who might be too young to know what the Oka crisis is and what your role in it was.
Well, the crisis took place in 1990 in the community of Ganasadaga and in the non-native community of Oka. It's given the title Oka Crisis, but we just call it the crisis in general, or 1990. It's another term. So what the crisis was a very drawn out dispute over land, part of many disputes that are occurring in and around this area related to dispossession of our lands by the non-native population. And this one in particular took a life of its own, and it turned into a internationally monitored conflict with Canadian soldiers and one police officer shot dead.
How did the crisis get started?
So that one has two answers actually. We have a contemporary answer and one with the roots, where the roots were set. So we'll start with the first one. The short answer is in the late 1980s, 88, 89, it came to light that the village of Oka and the Oka Golf Course, which was a private corporation.
And I'm sorry, Clifton, for our international listeners, where is this? Where is this?
It's northwest of Montreal.
Okay.
Yeah, so you have the city of Montreal in Quebec, Canada, and northwest of Montreal is the community of Ganasadaga and the community of Oka. They kind of they overlap each other.
And these are First Nations communities.
One is Ganasadaga, the other one's a French Canadian community. A lot of the communities are like that. We find a lot of our communities that are intertwined or overlapping or beside each other. That goes back to trading and so on. It's a long history of I guess intermingling with different communities for the purpose of trade and survival. Hang on a second here. So getting back to what I was saying, in our community, in the community of Oka, there was a golf course that was built in the 1950s on disputed land, right on the boundary between the community of Ganasadaga and the community of Oka. And that golf course was built right beside our cemetery, a cemetery that we'd been using for almost 300 years. And when they built that golf course, they deliberately boxed in our cemetery with the entrance road. So they made like a square entranceway. So here's our cemetery in the middle. Here's the main road. Here's our cemetery. They made an entrance going on like this, so we couldn't expand the cemetery through. That was the first thing they did. Then they built the golf course on areas where we were using to pasture some cattle and so on and so forth. and they took that away from us because it was not had natural fairways that were developed for between the trees where the grass was growing, where we were taking our cattle. That some of the richer people in the village of Oak would play golf on,
Hmm.
and so they decided to build a golf course there. That's a basic story about how the golf course got started originally. But in the late 1880s, it had come into light that they wanted to expand this golf course from the original 9 holes into 18 holes. And that little cemetery I was talking about, part of their plan was to exhume that cemetery of all the dead and put it in a common grave elsewhere and make a parking lot. And then the pine forest, which was surrounding that area, we had these huge pine trees, and those pine trees were planted there a couple 100 years ago, prevent erosion of that hill of sand that the trees and the golf course are located on. And that hill of sand is what we call our community of Ganasadage. It's named after that hill of sand. Ganasadage means the hill of sand, and that's exactly what we're naming our village after in our community. That being said, the idea that those trees that would be cut to us was insulting to say the least, and add salt to the wound to say that they're gonna furthermore dig up our dead. My great grandparents are there. My grandparents are there. I have my uncles there. I have siblings that are buried there. To dig that up to create a parking lot to serve elite people coming to play a golf game, uh, to us was outrageous, absolutely outrageous. So from that point, we
Especially,
began.
sorry, Clifton, especially because there was already a golf course there.
Yes,
They were
yeah,
just trying to play 18 holes instead of just 9.
yeah, and it was also planned for luxury homes to be built, around the golf course. Like I guess what kind of a package deal. You have your golf package, you have your condo, and you have your golf course right beside it. Something to that effect. And it's a beautiful area. It's a pine forest. It's just on the foothills of the Laurentians. So you have the Laurentians right there, and you have that skier's paradise, and it's all geared out to be a great place for wealthy people to come and reside. Right. You have a lot of that stuff going on down in BC also, right? You have that kind of incentive of a of a wonderful area to have a golf course and a beautiful place to live. So it's not unique to Oka or Quebec for that matter. But that period of time, we discovered that they were going to do that, and we began marching and protesting against the idea that they were gonna do this project. And on top of that, there was a larger land claim issue that had been brewing for many years prior to that. Um, and to be honest, there was a very long history of tension, but also intermingling with the people in the village of Oka. Uh, there was racism that was outright by some people. There was always the invisible racism that we experienced, like being shut off from jobs, being followed around sometimes in markets, and so on. But there was also a lot of integration. A lot of people. We partied together. We socialized together. We did things together. We ate together. A lot of intermarriages in the '80s and so on. So it was kind of an odd mix of those two things prior to 1990. So when we decided to put a stop to what was going to happen
Clifton, who's the we? Is it a community-led organization? Is it led more
the
top down
community,
by the tribal government?
what I mean by we is the Ganastauga Mohawks and the people of Oka, the French Canadian population. That's what I mean by we.
But when you talk about
We
that,
being the Mohawks.
when you talk about the Mohawk deciding to put a stop to it, is this more of a ground up led organization, or is it led more top down by tribal elders?
It was from the band council and from the community. It was both.
Okay.
It had two heads to it.
Okay.
There was a community element, and there was also the band council that was driving forward with those things. Because at the time, the band council brought it to light that this was happening. They allowed people to know because they had to, I guess, had to be informed that this project was going to be happening. And once they had the information, they were able to share it with us, and we got more information about what was going to happen, how it was going to happen. So at that point, we decided to occupy this pine forest. So in this pine forest that I'm talking about, not only do we have our cemetery in there, but we also do lacrosse games, and lacrosse to us is a very important game. it's tied into our traditions also in our religious practice. So we play lacrosse to have medicine games, and that's where we play it in the Pines. We used to gather there too, like for community events. There are many recorded events that happened over there that community used this area for, and it's like I said, it's a pivotal point in our community, and it's important for us and to see or have the idea that they were going to come in there and do this development. People were outraged to say the least. Like nobody was going to have anything to do with that, and it was always that we've always been struggling over this issue in this community for as long as I can remember. It's always been an issue of land in this community, and that being the ultimate one. So it mobilized a lot of people, including myself. At the time, I started getting involved at the age of 15. Doing marches. Sometimes, I've never been one that's been afraid to speak. So I'll get up and I'll be vocal and I'll say what I need to say in order to promote what I believe is right. And what was going on in the Pines was something that I believed in my heart that I had to speak up about. So I got involved at that age and being involved in the marches, speaking on camera in front of the media, doing what I can to see that we can stop this project, and including the occupation of the pine forest afterwards. And in March of 1990, that's exactly what we did. We went in there, we took it over. I don't know if you're familiar with a fishing shanty.
You mean like an old Irish, fishing chant?
No, a shanty. It's like a shack, right?
Oh, no.
They put
I'm
their
from the desert. I know nothing about fishing or the ocean.
okay. So over here, the winters get so cold that the lakes freeze solid. You can literally drive on them, and you can drag cabins onto the ice
Mm.
and drill holes and use the cabins as a shelter while you fish. So we brought one of those cabins into the pine forest to act as a shelter because it gets pretty cold out in Quebec, and even in March, there's still quite a lot of snow, particularly in the forest. So in our minds, we decided we're gonna occupy this forest and make sure that no surveyors, nobody comes in to start any work in the forest. We'll put a stop to the work. So this is what happened in March of 1990, and it was a long, cold spring. Nothing really happened. We stayed there, but uh, what did happen? It's not fair to say nothing happened. What happened was there was a cohesive thing happening between us. There was a bond developing. Our community was becoming stronger. We were becoming more bonded to what we were doing. We're becoming more active and more concerned about maintaining this group of people who were like minded to go forward and fight what we felt was important. We all had this in our heart to do this. So it was a core of us that organized, and we organized and kept organizing harder and
The
harder.
Was this core all local members of the band?
All community members. It was 95% indigenous and maybe 5% of non-indigenous, and that's not because they came from any activist communities, just because they were married in or non-native people who were living among community members at the time.
Got it.
So we organized ourselves, and at the same time, the plans were being pushed forward by the municipality of Oka, and there was no room. They had no room to negotiate with us to have any dialogue to find out if we could do something different with this project. So we became a little harder lined also with what we were gonna say. We basically said, project's not going through. Period. This is something we're against, and that's that. That being said, the village of Oka started taking legal steps in order to block us and remove us from that pine forest. And one of the things they did is impose an injunction on us through Quebec Superior Court to have us removed from the pine forest. So the first attempt was made in May of 1990, and we put up enough resistance that they backed down. There was no removal. The injunction didn't go through. Um, Things went back to the status quo. Nothing happened in the pine forest. Nothing happened with anything anymore. In fact, things got very dead.
Hmm.
It almost died, and in fact, the movement that we started almost died at that time. It got so quiet. I remember it being so dead that we still wanted to make sure that village of Oka knew that we were still doing and actively watching the forest. So we'd park an old car and put a stuffed animal in the car, and so that we'd be able to do our days and rest. Cause it's tiring doing this type of thing. It takes a lot out of you.
And
And after a while,
you're only 15 at the time.
15, 16 years old, going to high school,
What did your
missing
par
school.
what did your parents think of your dedication to activism at
My
15?
my mom was on board with it, but, that now I'm 17 at the time that we're talking about this. I 17. I turned 18, the May just before the crisis took off. Yeah, my mom was supportive of what I did, but she moreover wanted me to go to school.
Mm,
I wanted to be in school. She didn't want me to be out there in the forest, but the pines won, put it that way.
yeah.
I followed up a whole year of school because of the crisis, because I wasn't at school at all. I spent it in the pine forest. That was a point of contention that we had during that period of time. Um, so after May of 1990, again, we started hearing rumors that they're gonna try again in the summer to push their plan forward of creating this expansion of the golf course and this luxury home development. So we started to have people from other Mohawk communities come down, and they joined us in occupying the pine forest, and it was kind of like a almost like a family gathering. We're all getting ready to do things, but we're also planning and preparing ourselves to fight. And here comes July the 11th.
And
And
is this still at this point, is it still almost entirely, indigenous people who are protecting the
100%,
land?
100%. And here comes July 11th, morning of July 11th, and at the crack of dawn, a bunch of rental trucks show up with the tactical team, and they start putting up a perimeter around us in the forest, and that's where things started taking off, and the police came and they started escalating the violence, throwing tear gas at us, distraction devices, explosive distraction device, flashbangs they call them, um, taking put shots at us with their rifles, um, trying to incite something with us, and we held our ground for the longest time, and then finally, after a couple of hours, they made their move and decided to come in force. So they jumped over the barricade that we had constructed to block the forest off, and they started opening up on our men and our women, and we retaliated. We shot back, and you hear that there's audio. If you search it, you can probably find it on YouTube. The audio of that morning, you can hear the gunfire between the two sides. Uh, in that shootout, a police officer was shot and killed, and it's not certain where that round came from. Some people speculate that police accidentally shot their own. The jury's out, so I don't know what happened at that point. I wasn't in that vicinity of where that happened. Um, that being said, the police fled and they abandoned their vehicles, and which we made short work of crushing and making a barricade to block the road to make sure that they wouldn't come back in for a second round of fighting, because we were afraid that considering that we knew that one of the officers was shot and killed, that it could potentially be quite a bloody battle on our hands if they came back.
Now, at this time, how is the local and national media treating the crisis? Is it just your normal
It's
race?
not national yet. It's being treated as a criminal thing. It was a shock. It was a shock to the system, to put it lightly. The local media were befuddled, to say the least. I remember the looks of being having a chance to catch the local news, and just seeing the looks on the anchors' faces of the local media, and this look of bewilderment and shock, like there's Indians in Quebec and they're revolting, and it's like they were dumbfounded about what was going on, and a lot of people like it. A lot of people in Montreal area had no idea. Some people living in the area had no idea Indians even existed around the city of Montreal. It was really, quite I'm using the term Indian because that's the colloquial term, right? Besides being, in absolute shock about what was going, uh, the French media decided to go, and, travel down a very racist road with their coverage of what was going on in the Oka crisis. Um, with particular emphasis on, on what they call Quatre Saisons at the time, which turned into TVA, which is owned by Quebecor, which in turn is owned by Pierre Carpelledo and the Paledo family, who are the people who run the Quebecor corporation. It's like a billionaire guy from Quebec. Um, and these people absolutely despise indigenous people. And because their model is based on resource extraction, which is based on stolen indigenous land. So that's within their model, right? Absolutely have to be anti-indigenous to do what they do for a living. And they did a great deal of cowardly journalism and racist journalism, in my opinion. And it's nothing new with them. If you want to go back into the future, into the current era, um, Journal de Montréal and Quebecor publications, including TVA, which is their news branch on the TV news, their TV station. They actively um, did false stories, accusing Muslims and imams in different mosques in and around Montreal of being difficult and attacking women who work. You know the whole story. Yeah, all this Islamophobic bullshit, which at the end of the day ended up coming up to the point where the gunman went into the mosques in Quebec City and shot up those people, killed six worshippers in the mosque in Quebec City. So that's Quebec media for you. And they did the same thing to us in 1990. They painted us with this brush that we're all terrorists, that we're not even Canadian citizens. And I'm not. I'm not a Canadian citizen. I may live in what so-called Canada, but I'm a Mohawk at the beginning of the day and the end of the day. I was born a Mohawk. I'll die a Mohawk. I've never been a Canadian citizen. I'll never be one. Never be an American citizen either. I'm very proud of that fact. You know that's the point of pride for me. Um, that being said, um, these television stations and the radio stations, they did a lot in cranking up the hatred to the point that race riots started breaking out in places like Chateauguay, which is a community right beside Ganawaga. There's a part of the story I forgot to mention, which I don't want to confuse your guests too much, but there's another Mohawk community that's south of Montreal, and it's a community called Ganawaga. And Kahnawake is right adjacent to the island of Montreal. It's right on the south side of Montreal, and it shares a major link of the Mercier Bridge, which feeds from the South Shore, which are suburbs on the south side of the St. Lawrence River that feed into Montreal. That's like the workforce. A lot of people go through the Mercier Bridge through Kahnawake to work in Montreal, and they pass through Kahnawake. In 1990, we had an alliance because they're our sister. They're our sister community that they would help us and they would defend us if anything happened. And what they did after the shootout occurred once we got attacked, in order for us to be safe and not be attacked again, they blocked the Mercier Bridge and they blocked off the whole community of Kahnawake, effectively shutting off the island of Montreal from the South Shore on that part, that sector of the South Shore of Montreal from that demographic. I think a couple million people were cut off from the city of Montreal at that point. And that's where the Oka crisis really started taking off. That was July 11th of 1990. And that incident alone right there gave license to the Quebecor and those other journalists from that school of journalism to really crank up the hatred. And through the reporting and through the editorializing of what was happening in the 1990 crisis, uh, often what would happen in the Chateauguay part of Kahnawake, which is the town that situates itself on the trying to give them an idea to your listeners. Okay, so you have the island of Montreal. Okay, so you have the island of Montreal. You have the south part of Montreal, the south part of Montreal. You have the north part of Montreal. It's almost like an eyeball. Montreal is like a big eyeball. Okay, and in the middle of the island there's Laval, Montreal. South side is Kahnawake, and up here on the north side, northwest side is Kanesatake. So the south side of Montreal was blocked off, and we are up here on the north side. So there was no way that anybody could get from the north side or the east or the south side into Kahnawake or to Kanesatake when we blocked off the bridge. Kahnawake blocking the bridge was a big point of contention, and that's what drew the most attention to this crisis. Uh, the fact that there was a shootout and there was a cop that was killed during a shootout no doubt drew a lot of attention. But the blocking of that major bridge into a major North American city, that that made people stand up and look, and that became an international thing. Um, One of the reasons why it became international is absolutely nothing was happening on the international scene.
Mm,
One of the rare moments in history where nothing was happening.
mm,
I mean, you could hear crickets internationally on that era of 1990. The only thing that was on the in the works was Germany. What was going on in Germany? Reunification plans and the fall of the wall and all that stuff had happened just prior to the Oka crisis. So that was still something that we're talking about. I think it was just the cusp of reunification of East and West Germany was thing that was on the docket. So the 1990 crisis just had but had headlines across the world, and it's particularly that the fact that these wars that the Western world and the Western media and the European media associated with the 19th century. Well, wow, there's a settler and Indian war happening again in the 20th century, the late 20th century in Canada. What's going on over here? And the attention was focused with laser precision on Canada. What's going on? You had the United Nations, you had the European Parliament, everybody asking Canada what's going on, what's happening, what are you going to do about this? Then you had the population of Canada also like we want a resolution to this. We want to be able to use the Mercier Bridge. We want to be able to find out why this is happening. And then you had the government who basically didn't want what was going on with us to be successful because then it would provide a precedent for other nations to do the same. So it was in their interest to both finish this quickly and to quash it. And it was an embarrassment internationally because Canada has this reputation of being this bastion of human rights and peacekeeping nation and so on. And here they are fighting with a bunch of Mohawks over land and escalating the situation to the point where they called in the army. Um, Now on the international end of things, at this point, just prior to them calling the army, Saddam Hussein had invaded Kuwait. That was the story that started at that point. After that point, the attention kind of went the opposite direction.
yeah.
Um, but they sent more soldiers. Not that I support what they did in Kuwait or Iraq or Afghanistan, any of these wars. I support none of that. But just to give you an idea, they sent more soldiers to Kanasadaga and Kanawaga than they sent to Kuwait during the Desert Storm War.
The Canadian government, you mean?
Yes, they sent something like 5,000 soldiers for 40 Mohawks. We had F-16s flying over us. We had they had evacuated I think it was a 10-kilometer radius around Ganasadaga Oka because they were setting up artillery batteries in Hudson, Quebec, across the river from us to bombard us, to shell us.
And I assume the heaviest weapons that the Mohawk warriors had on them were probably hunting rifles.
Oh, AK-47s,
Yeah.
which at the time were legal to buy, by the way. All you needed was a federal firearms acquisition certificate, an FAC, they called it at the time. You could literally go into a store and buy a civilian version of an AK-47. And I think it was called an M56, the Chinese variant of it. You could buy it in any gun store as long as you had that certificate. In fact, you could buy one at the age of 16, which is what I did.
So what happened after the army comes in?
After the army comes in, well, what happened is they reduced the perimeter in the community. They set up more tactical checkpoints because for in the military they have to have their tactical advantage, right? And they'll never set up a position that's not tactically advantageous or defendable. Where they were laughing at that. I remember hearing arguments between the SQ and the army because we're earshot of them, and the army making fun of the SQ for putting the positions in disadvantageous places, like at the bottom of hills and so on. And because it was ridiculous, like so you have Ganasdaga is on a hill. It's a big hill. Whole community is on a hill. The elevation, right? It's like a big hill. So everywhere on either side, on the east side, and the west side, and the north side, they have to go up a hill to get into the community. So the Sûreté de Quebec, all their positions were at the bottoms of the hills around the whole community, and that's what they're making fun of. Like, why you have yourself at the bottom of a hill?
Hmm.
Not a place where you put yourself. So the army wanted to have a little more of a tactically, I guess, for lack of a term for it, a tactically advantageous position to be in. So part of that was to shrink part of the perimeter. They wanted to get a little more inside, so they did that by force. They closed the perimeter. They ringed us in a bit more, and then they kept doing that, and the perimeter kept getting tighter and tighter till finally they had 40 of the warriors and the women, and mostly women and children, surrounded in what they called the Ganastaga Onadogo Treatment Center, which was an alcohol and drug treatment facility that was located right across from the Pines, in the Pines, but right across from the area where the shootout happened. So that we had used that as a home base for logistics, for have a place for cooking, have an infirmary if we need it, so on and so forth. So everybody got trapped in that, and the army put a barbed wire perimeter around that whole place, and for about a month, people were trapped inside there till the end of September. Then people decided to walk out, and when they walked out, there was a big riot that occurred, and there was hand-to-hand fighting with the soldiers. There's a lot of real interesting photographs if you look them up. Robert Galbraith was one of the photographers from the Gazette. He was a freelance photographer, took a lot of pictures of that incident, of that time, and yeah, that's what happened after the army went in. It ended not too long after, like in the end of September, and people who were there were taken into custody, and then the community was under occupation for about a year, under military occupation.
What happened to the land?
It's still in limbo. Nothing's been resolved.
Has anything been built on it?
No, golf course is still status quo. Um, right now, what we have some community members who have taken out parts of that land in question and opened up businesses on them, which I'm not necessarily keen on, but I understand why. Um, there's a
Have there
protest
been
that's missing.
have there been any efforts by either the provincial or the federal governments to reclaim that land from the Mohawk?
No, it's an open can of worms. It's really bad. What came out of this, though, the 1990 crisis is there was an awakening that happened. It's a very pivotal. I hate using that word. I've been using that word a lot. Pivotal. It's one of those words, right?
That's all
Uh,
right. I'll forgive you.
it's an important. It's a watershed moment. For another cliche term, right? In indigenous movements, because people were asleep.
Hmm.
Things were stagnant. Nothing was happening. The last big movement that occurred was Wounded Knee in 1973.
Yeah.
To refresh everybody's memory, if they don't know what it is, Wounded Knee is in South Dakota, just adjacent to the Pine Ridge Reservation, which is a Lakota reservation, and basically, it's one of the poorest places in the Americas. And the American Indian movement, which came out of the urban indigenous experience, came back to the reservation to reoccupy and to rekindle their search for their culture, search for the language. This all happened in the late '60s with the rise of the rights movements and so on. The civil rights movement and so on. So our people also started rising up and coming out of that stupor of residential schools, out of that stupor of colonization, what they went through, and they basically took over the Wounded Knee trading post, which is adjacent to the Wounded Knee massacre site. The Wounded Knee massacre happened in 1890. It was considered the last war, the active military war that the U.S. engaged with indigenous people, where they massacred a couple hundred Lakota people in December, I think December 26th of 1890, uh, and um, and basically crushed any hope that people had of being themselves and being their own people. They did this because they practiced a dance that they hoped to liberate them from the starvation and the life on the reservation, and that was their crime. They were gunned down for dancing. That was
And
the last war. And
you were
from that point, like the Wounded Knee area is very sacred to us, to all natives. I'm not Lakota, but to me too, the Wounded Knee is sacred. That place is sacred.
and you were saying the Oka crisis awakened that spirit of activism that hadn't been seen
That,
since
that,
Wounded
that,
Knee?
well, getting back to what we're saying, in 1973, the American Indian movement took over that Wounded Knee area, and to call attention to what was happening on the reservations, to call attention to the poverty, the lack of education, the lack of employment. Like there was almost a 80% unemployment rate on the reservations. And some reservations are still like that. And they wanted to call attention to that. And what happened at that point is they sent in law enforcement and the FBI, and there was exchanges of gunfire, and people were killed. And it started a standoff. And that standoff, I think it lasted 54 days or something to that effect. And that was the last time that something to that magnitude occurred for Indigenous people as a movement in 1973. Yeah, you can look up Marlon Brando received an Oscar for
It's
Godfather,
Oscar. Yeah, he
and
refused
he
to accept
refused
it.
it. He
Yeah.
sent up the Shashin Littlefeather. It was because of what was going on in Wounded Knee. So at Wounded Knee, you had a lot of people show up at Wounded Knee. You had Muhammad Ali go there. You had Angela Davis go there. You had Marlon Brando. You had a lot of people go there, and Robert Redford was another one to show support. Because, like, why are we still fighting Indians? That's what they're saying. Why are we still doing this? Why are we in this war, right? And it was just at the end of the Vietnam War, which again a lot of our people fought and we volunteered to go and fight. And that's a whole other podcast. Didn't get into that stuff.
What was the effect of Oka on your personal life? So September 1990, the crisis is over for better or for worse. You're 18. You just spent the last year of your life not in school, but as a warrior defending your community lands. What do you do then? I mean, where do you go from there?
Well, we try to organize, right? There was this dream that we keep the momentum going and get things going into a bigger place. You know, there's some disappointment attached to that. To be honest, I'm 54 now, and and having seen things not happen the way I would hope that they happen, it's a little bit of a bitter pill. On a positive, with that, I seen that what we did in 1990 had a positive effect, and it caused stuff to move forward in regards to Indigenous rights in Canada. It was a step forward. It pushed progression. Is what I'm trying to get at.
Why do you think Oka, the aftermath, did not go the way you wanted it to go? Why do you think that is?
Some of it's deliberate. Some of it's necessary to punish us for the actions that we took out. Um, this place is so messed up politically. There's so many different problems in this community. You always wonder and scratch your head why. Then you think back, oh, I know why. It's necessary to keep us down and keep us punished for what happened in 1990. So if you stand up and you do things, this is what's going to happen to you. Look at Oka. Look at Ganasabagi. Look how messed up that place is. I'm very firmly in belief that that's what they're doing to us over here. I have no answer to why things are so difficult in this community all the time. I know I have some answers to that. There's a historical answer to that. There's a lot of bullshit that happened to our people over the years, over our history, which contributes to the way we are. Like, there's no community that can remain buoyant after enduring genocide.
Yeah.
Very hard. You know, we're at that point where our ancestors went through some bloody genocides, and then we went through the aftermath of genocide, the oppression, the residential schools, and then all this stuff came to a point in 1990. And then after that, like we're hoping for something. I think for me, it was the desire to see something better happen.
After after Oka, I think many years after Oka, you gave an interview which I saw, and you offered a quote which I want to read to you and ask for your explanation because I thought it was really interesting. You said, quote, "After Oka, I became so militant, I became unapproachable. I wouldn't have been able to talk to you." What do you mean by that?
Exactly what I meant by that. Like you
When
mentioned
you when
something.
you say, when you say I wouldn't have been able to talk to you, what do you mean by that in
I
particular?
I I I was hard in my outlook. I felt bruised and angry that they sent the army on us. I felt bruised and angry that they burnt my people in effigy, like witnessing race riots, and where you're the target. Um, the bullshit that we had to deal with, leaving the community and the racism that we had to deal with, and the smart mom. I mean, I remember once going to the dentist and having supposed to have a filling fixed, and he didn't freeze my mouth, and he started working, and I complained. I said, "Hey, what are you doing, buddy? It hurts." So you're tough here in Mohawk, to block a bridge. You can take this. literally walked out of his office still with my teeth half drilled, and
That's unbelievable.
and found another dentist to fix it, to emergency fix it. But that type of things like that, getting pulled over, like I call it the DWI, driving while Indian. That would happen a lot. Like I'm not, I don't look extremely indigenous. Like I could pass as a white guy, no problem. But I have some of my cousins who are very dark, with black hair, your atypical, stereotypical indigenous look, and they eat hell. They still do. But our license plates are enough sometimes, right? And it comes up on that scanner, and it's like, oh, he's from that place. He's one of them savages. Let's stop him. So we know about that. We know about driving while black. We know driving while Indian. I've been the victim of that a number of times, and not too long ago either. I got pulled over for a dirty license plate, which is something, I guess, an offense according to the police. I have a dirty license plate. To see some of the license plates I see in Quebec, you'd laugh. You'd be saying, "Yeah, that's a good one." Um, Seeing all of that stuff really hardened me.
Yeah.
It hardened me. There was incidents, like there was one really violent race riot that happened, which was at the foot of the Mercier Bridge.
Is this during the crisis?
Yeah. So the people, elderly and ill and the young, they found out that the army's coming up, and they got rightfully scared. They don't know what's gonna happen, if there's gonna be a war, if the guys in Ganawaga are gonna start fighting with the army, like a full-on fight. What's gonna happen, right? And they decided to leave. So this one radio personality by the name of Gilles Proulx starts getting on the radio, and he starts rallying people, talking about how the army and the SQ and the government allowing these Indians to use the bridge, allowing your bridge to be used by the same Indians that are blocking it. What are you going to do about it? So just cranking up this hatred, just cranking it and cranking it. So now a whole bunch of rioters show up at the foot of the Mercier Bridge. And prior to that bridge being blocked in 1990, there was construction work being done. They're reconfiguring the accesses to it. So there's all kinds of broken concrete everywhere from the demolitions. So the SQ and the RCMP, they kept people parked in the sun and the heat on that bridge for hours until a group of hundreds of rioters showed up at the foot of the bridge. Then they let them drive through.
Mm.
And when they drove through a rain of rocks, and one man was killed. That was Mr. Lacroix. It's funny that they thought they killed a Mohawk, but they didn't kill an Indian. They killed a World War I veteran, a French Canadian veteran. He hit that rock, went through the window, hit him in the chest, and killed him. That's what happened over there. And nobody went. They went to jail. They got slaps on the wrist. Nobody paid for that. And that really hardened my soul. And if you would say to me, well, when I was young, I used to say, like, yeah, I'm a Canadian. I'd be happy to say, yeah, I'm a Canadian. I could say that. I was honestly say, oh yeah, I guess I am a Canadian. But after 1990, you call me anything but a Mohawk, I'd be insulted.
Where has your activism taken you since 1990?
Where hasn't it taken me? It's more of it's taken me all over the world. Actually, I've spoken about the Oka crisis, uh, in Europe, in the Middle East, in Asia, uh, all over North America. It's taken me around. It's opened my eyes. It's helped me. It's helped me meet people. I've had some interesting encounters with people, with that being the source of that encounter, right? Like I met you too. Like I wouldn't be sitting here if it wasn't for what happened in 1990. I wouldn't have met Frank because all that stuff all the stuff that we did in 1990, and my experiences led me to become more of an activist, getting involved with being in tune with the environment, being in tune with pipeline, anti-pipeline activism, anti-mining, resource extraction, and that's where I met Frank. Doing the stuff with resource extraction. Um,
Now your activism is taking you to Palestine.
and that's another weird road to that one there. Like, I've always had a fascination with the Mideast. Um, I think part of it has to do with being force-fed Christianity as a child.
Mm.
That real negative look at religion, how that religion was so prevalent in my family. My grandmother was a very fervent Christian. She was evangelical Christian. I wasn't. I rejected Christianity. At the age of 12, 13, I told my mom, I don't want to, I have no interest in the church anymore. My mom wasn't really a churchgoer. She's like, it's fine, you do what you want. And then I eventually brought my mother to the fold of looking at traditionalism and what that could be. For a while, I was traditional. I got into our traditions and started learning that. My high school, um, prior to 1990, we had a decision in the community to send some of us, our kids, to Ganawagit, to go to the Ganawagit Survival School for high school. I was one of those kids that went to that prior to 1990, and I got introduced to the longhouse through that, through the traditional people, and got involved in my traditions, understanding where we're from, having a limited knowledge of it because, again, residential school, my grandfather being a survivor of those schools, anything traditional was a faux pas. You don't talk about it, and there's that whole internalized racism that's attached to that also. Um, that if they're traditional, they're dirty, they're low, they're dark, they're witches,
Yeah.
and that's something that lasted in this community for a long time. It still has some people who believe that run around with that kind of a mentality. Um, but for me, all the stuff that I did up to that point, the traditional stuff and the Oka crisis, it just hardened me into being a militant and being an indigenous, to say the least, for lack of a better term. And I think being involved with the traditional people and being activists go hand in hand because of the situation we're in. We it led itself to it that we have to. We have no choice.
Speaking of, you said speak indigenous. Speaking of that term, you gave another interview in which you said that you hate the term First Nations.
Yeah,
Curious if you still hate that term, and if so, why?
they're loaded terms, right? First Nations, well, First Nations of many, right? That's what I'm trying to say. Like, well, you're just one of the nations that came here. We're another nation, so what we're doing to you is okay because we're one of many nations. You're included in that. Uh, at the end of the day, I prefer to be called Kanokahaga. I prefer to be called who we are by our own terms, because it's this whole idea of a pan-indigenous identity. It's bullshit, and that's what First Nations is. That's what Aboriginal is. It's this whole idea that we're one single cohesive bunch of people, and we're not. The Kanien'kehá:ka people are not the Wet'suwet'en people. The Wet'suwet'en people are not the Plains Cree. The Plains Cree are not the Innu in the north. And the Inuit. What about the Inuit? They're not like anybody else either. They're different. They're different ways of thinking, different ways of governing ourselves, different traditions, different protocols. We're similar with our histories, but we're different people. We're not this whole identity of Indian. It's like, oh, like saying European. Why are Europeans? Like, so all the Europeans are doing this. No, they're not. Because the Germans don't agree with what the Spanish do, and the Spanish don't agree with the Portuguese. Portuguese don't like the English. So where do we go, right? You get my gist of
Yeah.
that? It's like that's as ridiculous as saying European. Yeah, all European interests are the same.
It's really popular now to talk about decolonization.
Mm.
And I've found in my personal experience that that term can often be a meaningless term, especially when used by politicians and political parties. But the concept, I think, is obviously noble. If colonization is evil, which it was, then decolonization is necessary. What do you think real meaningful decolonization should look like?
I think that's a real hard one. It's a hard one because you have to first, yeah, you have to build the trust to decolonize, and the trust isn't established yet.
Mhm.
How do you build that trust? Well, you stop attacking people who are defending resources. That's the start of that. And have honest dialogue, not just dialogue to say, well, we're talking, we don't agree with you, we're going to attack you anyway with our police forces. That's not meaningful. We can't get to that point we need to get to have true reconciliation. Uh Time is a healer also, right? Have the time, make it fair. Uh I think because of the fact that we live in a capitalist society, true reconciliation is impossible.
So that was going to be my next question: is do you even think it's possible to
Not in
truly
a capitalist,
colonize?
not in a capitalist model, impossible. Because this model, particularly the North American model, relies on a natural world as
Yeah.
a commodity to prop up its capitalist interest. That's what that's about.
Is there discussion in your community about what the world will look like when capitalism runs its course? Because I think it's obvious to a lot of people that we are facing that prospect with late stage capitalism, environmental degradation, political unrest, that this system that we've so long thought of as immovable and unchangeable actually could move and change very significantly within our lifetimes. Has there been discussions within your community and amongst your friends about either how to take advantage of that or how that will affect the day-to-day life of the community?
Very honestly, my community is in such turmoil right now. I don't think they think about what's going to happen next year,
Mm.
let alone that kind of thing. I think about that type of thing.
What are your thoughts?
My thoughts is that we're in a very bad place, and if we don't get our shit together, things are going to go very bad very quickly. Um, I'm fearful. I'm looking at a world that just put its feet up, crossed its arms, and popped the popcorn and watched genocide unfold in 4K and did fuck all about it. Uh, that context, um, what will anybody say when they come for me?
Yeah.
That's what it is. What will they say when they come for you? That's where we are right now.
Do you
We're in a very dangerous place.
do you think your experience during Oka has given you a particular perspective, whether it be on Gaza, whether it be on, environmental degradation? What parts of Oka do you take with you? I mean, the answer is probably everything because you're the same person as you were in 19 or but s there is many parts of you that are the same since 1990. But what lessons or what has changed about your approach that first started with Oka and that activism from 1990?
I've changed radically since 1990, to be very honest with you. Um, in your last conversation we had, the last podcast I was on with you, we had a discussion. You talked about birthright.
Yeah, and just
Birthright.
for the people who didn't listen, let me bring
Yeah,
up
yeah.
to speed. Clifton and Frank and I were talking about Clifton and Frank's film Red Road to the West Bank, and I was mentioning how I was raised Jewish and how when I was in high school, I didn't go on Birthright, but I went on a trip that was very much like Birthright. I spent a summer in Israel, and it's amazing to me looking back with my politics now, looking back 30 years ago, how successful the propagandists were when it came to inculcating American youth in this pro-Zionist, pro-Israeli project. Because when I got back from my summer in Israel, I could not have been more pro-Israeli, pro-Zionist. I told my parents I wanted to enlist in the Israeli Defense Forces. Thankfully, that all quickly subsided, and I came to my senses. But the propaganda, the culture, is very, very strong and very powerful.
Yeah, I relate to that a lot because I went through the same process. Because we had a well, like we said, I was talking earlier about movements building on each other, right? So you had the American Indian movement and the whole incident at Wounded Knee in 1973. Well, from that, the modern warrior society, which is what you get the warrior flag from 1990, that red flag with the sun on it, and the Indian head, that has its roots in that movement also. So also in the 1970s, there was a liberation of land in the Adirondacks in New York State that was taken back from the movement, and it had there was some violent incidents attached to that. Also, there was shootouts with local settlers in order to get that land back, and it ended up having a territory uh, retaken by our people called Ganyonge, which is near Altona, New York. And, our people basically took over that area, and they live there to this day, following what they want to follow under the great law. That's something that where that movement brought to us to that point where we had actual people going back trying to take land back again in the Adirondacks and in our traditional territories. Along that context, I got involved in the traditional uh, belief systems in high school in Ganawaga when I went to Ganawaga, as I would said earlier, and we went to camps in Ganawaga that trained us politically and militarily
Mm.
how to defend the land and what to do and what our doctrines were as warriors, right? What who were we? And we followed the teachings of Louis Hall, Ariwakehte, who was the man who designed the warrior flag and who was the founder of the modern warrior society. And his stuff is very radical. I respect him a lot, but I think that we have to think beyond that now. At the time when he created those writings and he did that movement, it was vital, and we needed to have it at that point. But we needed to evolve beyond that right now. We're again, we're in very dangerous points in our history. In 1990, we're willing to fight, to block roads, to take it to nth degree to do what we have to do. Now, a lot of our people have been muddled by money. A lot of us have cigarette businesses, cannabis businesses, and they don't want to take that fight out because we don't want to interfere with the ability to make money. That's where we are right now. Um, as we were saying, like, how did I get to that point? I was indoctrinated and brainwashed into believing that I was a Iroquois supremacist. Just like you're a Zionist and Zio supremacy, and the same thing worked with us, right? With my ideology. Uh, I guess we'd have the same thing. You have Africanist movements in the black community that make people feel, in the young black youth feel like they're Afro supremacist also, right? So I think that's a natural occurrence of things, and I can see how the indoctrination works with white supremacy also, because I was an indigenous supremacist.
I mean, the concept is the same, right?
I think they live together. These people, they cut from the same cake, and
Yeah.
that's why I moved away from them because they're not good people.
Mm.
At the end of the day, and I don't want to get people wrong if anybody's watching this, and I'm not trying to say that Louis Hall, like Ariwakehte, and his teachings are bad. No, I'm saying for me, there's certain things attached to it, certain ideologies that developed from it that were unhealthy, and I could see like the relation between what I became radicalized in and how people can be radicalized into white supremacy and to Zionism. It's the same process. It's the same thing, right? Good or bad. It is what it is, right?
How do we, and this might be a good closing question, how do we resist that process of radicalization?
I think it starts with treating people with respect, because that's what makes you radical is when you feel like you've been disrespected, dispossessed, um, had stuff removed from you, like whatever it be, your spirit, your self-respect, people, the society and the system we're in is really good at taking away people's feelings of dignity. And I think that's where and then that radicalism steps into that void. It's like, hey, look at this. You can be this, you can do better. You can be better, right?
Mm.
I don't know if that makes any sense.
No, it does. Well, my friend, I think we're running short on time, but I really appreciate you visiting us again and speaking to us again for Seeds of Revolution.
It was my pleasure, Joel.
Can't wait to talk to you soon about the next topic.
Yes, sir, man. I'm always here.
And for those of you who did not hear our last episode with Clifton, please check out amplifierfilms.ca and read more about Clifton and Frank Lopez's film Red Road to the West Bank, in which Clifton and Frank are working on this incredible documentary about the commonalities between Indigenous Canadian experience and the Palestinian experience. And I think it's just going to be really wonderful.
Thank you for having me.
Any final plugs for that movie, Clifton?
Well, we're working away. We're diligently working. We have more clips coming out next week. I'm excited. I'm excited to getting this project on its way. I'm also got my eyes all constantly glued on the situation, so it's so fluid and it moves so quickly.
Yeah.
I want to see things happen in a good way. We'll see.
Well, thank you for doing the work that you do, my friend. I really appreciate it.
Thank you yourself for the work you do, my friend.
Talk to you soon.
So Peace.
If Jesus Christ came back today like you threaten he will, which poor group of people do you think that he would kill? And who would Jesus choose to starve if you gave him the chance? And if there was a genocide, would he take a neutral stance? Who would Jesus bomb? Tell me, who would Jesus bomb? Would it be kids in Palestine, or how about Vietnam? Would Jesus bomb the atheists, the Muslims, or the Jews? I want you to ask yourself, well, what would Jesus do? I want you to ask yourself, well, what would Jesus do? Would he say it's complicated and there's sinners on both sides? Or would he say that some people, they just deserve to die? If Jesus Christ rose from the dead and on a sidewalk slept, would you extend your hand to him or just watch where you stepped? Who would Jesus bomb? Tell me, who would Jesus bomb? Would it be kids in Palestine, or how about Vietnam? Would Jesus bomb the atheists, the Muslims, or the Jews? I want you to ask yourself, well, what would Jesus do? I want you to ask yourself, well, what would Jesus do? Would Jesus hate the gay folk, the queer folk, or the trans? Would he suggest they end their lives according to God's plans? Would Jesus tell a homeless man to get a fucking job, or turn his back on the poor? Would Jesus be a snob? Who would Jesus bomb? Tell me, who would Jesus bomb? Would it be kids in Palestine, or how about Vietnam? Would Jesus bomb the atheists, the Muslims, or the Jews? I want you to ask yourself, well, what would Jesus do? I want you to ask yourself, well, what would Jesus do? Would Jesus build a border wall? Would Jesus drive a tank? Would Jesus be a landlord? Would Jesus run a bank? Would Jesus Christ feel safe in his skin if he came to your town? And would you still believe in him if you found out he was brown? Who would Jesus bomb? Tell me, who would Jesus bomb? Would it be kids in Palestine, or how about Vietnam? Would Jesus bomb the atheists, the Muslims, or the Jews? I want you to ask yourself, well, what would Jesus do? I want you to ask yourself, well, what would Jesus do? Yeah, who would Jesus bomb? Tell me, who would Jesus bomb? Would it be kids in Palestine, or how about Vietnam? Would Jesus bomb the atheists, the Muslims, or the Jews? I want you to ask yourself, well, what would Jesus do? I want you to ask yourself, well, what would Jesus do? I want you to ask yourself, well,